The attack on pure worship in Russia includes an outright ban on our activities in that land. Now the authorities are moving forward in seizing properties owned by Jehovah's people.
When the Administrative Center of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia was declared extremist late last year by the courts, it gave the government the ability to seize the administration center's property.
Well then, what happens now? Where do we go from here, Richard?
Well, the brothers are planning to file an appeal within the given time. And if this first appeal goes against us, then the property will be seized by the government and used for other purposes. However, further appeals, possibly even to the European Court of Human Rights, will be pursued.
The European Court of Human Rights.
Watchtower notoriously changes their doctrines annually, sometimes even weekly. But there is one doctrine that has transcended every single generation of the New World Society: the doctrine of political neutrality. Every Jehovah's Witness, as well as the Bible students prior to that, believe they are politically neutral, since Watchtower forbids them from voting in elections and coerces them into claiming conscientious objector status for any form of military service. But is this all that is required to truly be politically neutral? In the October 1st, 1995 Watchtower, in an article about the United Nations entitled 50 Years of Frustrated Efforts, it states, "One major complication is the role that religion plays in world affairs. True, ever since the inception of the United Nations, the principal religions of the world have pledged their support to that organization. Referring to its 50th anniversary, Pope John Paul II spoke of the United Nations as the instrument par excellence for promoting and safeguarding peace. His sentiments are shared by a global community of religious leaders. But this tactful liaison between religion and government cannot hide the fact that religion has been a hindrance and a nuisance to the United Nations." In the book entitled United Nations, The First 50 Years by Stanley Meisler, it says low esteem for the UN in the 1970s would encourage some American interest groups to propose pulling out of it altogether. In the early 80s, the Conservative Heritage Foundation, the most influential think tank advising the Reagan administration, published a study concluding that a world without the UN would be a better world.
To its shame, the United Nations has long been a hostile place for the State of Israel. Both the current and the previous Secretary Generals have objected to the UN's disproportionate focus on Israel.
The first 50 years also recounts the instance of the first United Nations Conference on Women in Mexico City in June of 1975. On behalf of the Arabs, Third World delegates had just proposed adding a clause to the UN's first Declaration of Rights for Women. That clause, its relevance to women rather remote, would call for the elimination of Zionism. The amendment condemning Zionism filled many delegates from the industrialized countries with shivers of despair. They knew that a political battle over Israel would spoil all the good that might come out of the conference. In the end, only the United States and Israel voted against the declaration as a whole. It took 16 years before the General Assembly would revoke the resolution branding Zionism a form of racism and racial discrimination. The vote came less than a year after the victory over Iraq in the Persian Gulf War. The General Assembly revoked the old contentious resolution on December 16, 1991. Coincidentally, the same year Watchtower joined the United Nations as an NGO.
At the heart and soul of everything that is happening, ladies and gentlemen, in the world today, the driving force behind it is an ancient, secret religion that has as one of its tenets that there is a superior race. Their exoteric version of this religion is British Israelism, Zionism. There are many more Zionists that are Christians than are Jews. And most Jews don't buy into any of this baloney, ladies and gentlemen, don't even have the slightest idea what I'm talking about any more than most of you do. George Bush is one of these people. George Bush is not a Jew. The Pope is one of these people. The Pope is not a Jew. So don't compound the problem by thinking that you know exactly what it is that I'm talking about, because I can assure you that you don't.
Now, we understand today we're not going to hear Jehovah's voice say, this prophecy has now been fulfilled. That's not going to happen for us today. That's not the way things work. So how can we have a similar experience? Well, similar to what we already mentioned. Do your research. Dig deep into the scriptures. Look at the prophecies. Study the prophecy. Study the fulfillment. Study secular history to see how it matches with what the Bible has to say. Up until this point in our discussion, we've mostly discussed how Bible prophecies strengthens our own faith. And that's very important for us. But for the remainder of our talk, we're going to discuss how paying attention to future prophecies is vital for our salvation.
Jehovah!
To start, let's turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 3. Now, as we look up the scripture, we'd like to make just one note. As we go through this, we're going to be going into Revelation and Ezekiel. We're going to be talking about a lot of figurative, not literal, things that happen. And because they're figurative, different parties that we know represent different things in the world today. But due to time, we're not going to be able to explain exactly how it is that we know all of these things. So rather than taking our word for us identifying certain wild beasts as certain things today, please speak with your Bible study conductor or with who you came to the meeting with, or even one of the attendants here at the meetings, to prove it to yourself.
It's a wrong that undermines the credibility of this institution, and that in turn is harmful for the entire world.
With that in mind, let's go ahead and read 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. It says, whenever it is that they are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction is to be instantly on them, just like birth pains on a pregnant woman, and they will by no means escape. This is the next prophecy that we're really awaiting fulfillment of. And to break it down, basically what it is a cry of peace and security, or a declaration made by the world's governments. First of all, we have not yet had this happen. This declaration hasn't taken place yet. For one reason we know that it hasn't is because it says sudden destruction would follow. That hasn't been the case. Now, we don't know a lot about this cry. We don't know if it'll be one declaration or it'll be multiple declarations of peace and security. But we do know that this is what's going to kick off what the Bible refers to as the Great Tribulation. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But right now, let's just talk about this cry of peace and security first.
Worldwide security under the Prince of Peace, arguably one of the most nefarious Watchtower publications, says, Jehovah used the Persian ruler Cyrus to liberate his people from the ancient world power Babylon. But in the fullest sense, Cyrus was not the one meant in the closing words of Psalm 137, which refer to Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion.
O daughter of Babylon,
Who are to be despoiled.
happy will he be that rewards you with your own treatment with which you treated us. Happy will he be that grabs a hold and does dash to pieces your children against the crag.
Who will be that happy one? Does the happy one stand for the symbolic 10 horns that are upon the head of the wild beast, on the back of which the old harlot system of religion has ridden with such pomp for so long? No, because the political destroyers of the world empire of false religion do not destroy it to make way for the pure worship of the true God.
Many liberal organizations, including the United Nations, are pursuing the development of a one-world religious organization. Today, on the United Nations 55th anniversary, CBN News reporter Wendy Griffith takes a look at what's behind this push for a global religious voice.
After a while, the drums, chants, and prayers representing many of the world's leading religions all started to sound alike, somehow losing their flavor in a melting pot of spiritual soup. The first ever Millennium World Peace Summit of religious and spiritual leaders took place at the United Nations in August, and some believe it marked the first major step toward a movement to usher in a global spiritual body that may one day speak for all religions. Robert McGinnis with the Family Research Council says it appears the hidden agenda is to unite people under one religious organization so they will peacefully accept UN goals such as population control, abortion rights, and one world government.
Instead of all these different gods, maybe there's one God who manifests himself and revealed himself in different ways to different people. You know, what about that, huh?
CNN founder and billionaire Ted Turner was the honorary chair of the World Religion Summit. Turner, known for his critical views on biblical Christianity, promoted the New Age concept that there are many ways to heaven.
The thing that disturbed me is that my religious Christian sect was very intolerant, not intolerant of religious freedom for other people, but they thought that we were the only ones going to heaven.
Supporters of a global religious voice have come down hard on evangelical Christians who refuse to adopt their New Age agenda.
Although the URI says it is not a religion, critics say it does preach a theology that teaches acceptance and diversity among all faiths. Those who push for a global religious organization believe that all religions, while different on the surface, are each valid pathways to God.
The political powers of this world do not accomplish this anti-religious work out of love for Jehovah's worshipers. Why not? Because Jehovah's Witnesses will stand in the way of their producing an exclusively godless world. So the political powers are merely the instruments used by the God of the Witnesses to carry out his own purpose. Thus, though these political powers may be directly used in the annihilation of the world empire of false religion, it is really Jehovah God who is motivating them. How? He uses his empowered royal son, the greater Cyrus, Jesus Christ. Thus, Jesus Christ in kingdom power is the happy one foretold by the psalmist. So to clarify, Watchtower just compared Jesus to the 10-horned wild beast of Revelation, as well as the Persian ruler Cyrus, even going so far as to call him the greater Cyrus.
We may hear that, oh yeah, cry peace and security. Boy, the world is pretty far off from peace and security. Well, we may feel that way, but it's not necessarily the case. In fact, notice this was from a year ago now. This was the UN's high-level thematic debate. This is what the theme of it was, just last year. It says, the Assembly further decided that the theme of the high-level thematic debate shall be maintenance of international peace and security. In order to draw lessons from the experiences of the past 70 years, take stock of the present challenges in the area of peace and security, and renew the commitment of member and observer states to the Charter of the United Nations. High-level thematic debate was on peace and security. Notice the closing remarks from that meeting. We have come to an end of what I believe has been a truly enriching discussion on the UN's role in maintaining global peace and security. The recommendations included in the 3 UN reviews and other relevant processes provide us with a very solid basis from which to move forward.
When a nation is singled out for attack in this organization, that nation is disrespected. What's more, that nation is asked to pay for the privilege of being disrespected.
But that's not all. If you were to go to the United Nations website and type in the search bar, peace and security, you would get 106 results just from 2017. In addition to that, watching the news, probably many of us have seen that a lot of the world leaders have said recently, have mentioned those words, peace and security. The political leaders of the world, it's on their minds. They're trying, even if it may not seem like it, to work towards that goal. We are close.
Instead, there is a larger point to make. The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation.
But what takes place after that? We mentioned the Great Tribulation. Let's look at Revelation chapter 17 and verse 16. This is kind of the main event of what the Bible refers to as the Great Tribulation. That reads, "And the 10 horns that you saw in the wild beast, these will hate the prostitute and will make her devastated and naked, and they will eat up her flesh and completely burn her with fire." So let's identify the parties in this verse. These refers to the United Nations. The 10 horns there refer to all the political powers that back up the United Nations, that give them their ability to have the power they have.
We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit.
Then we see that it talks about the prostitute, or the great harlot, or Babylon the Great, representation in Revelation, and that refers to the world empire of false religion. All those who are claiming to worship God, but proving false to that claim. So what we see happening here is that the United Nations will act and destroy all those religions that are claiming to serve Jehovah, claiming to be lovers of Him, but proving false to that claim. Well, what happens to those who are serving Jehovah the way He pleases? What happens to the religion that is the true religion in Jehovah's eyes? Are they destroyed along with the false? No.
America will put our embassy in Jerusalem.
In fact, Matthew chapter 24, verses 21 and 22, Jesus tells us that this attack would be cut short on behalf of Jehovah's chosen ones. So this attack wouldn't necessarily affect the true religion. But does that mean that this is the end? False religion is destroyed, paradise begins, and it's over? No. In fact, notice Ezekiel chapter 38. And we'll look at verses 14 through 16. That reads, "So prophesy, Son of Man, and say to God, this is what the sovereign Lord Jehovah says. On that day, when my people Israel are dwelling in security, will you not know it? You will come from your place, from the remotest parts of the north, you and many peoples with you, all of them riding on horses, a great assembly, a vast army. Like clouds covering the land, you will come against my people Israel. In the final part of the days, I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I sanctify myself through you before their eyes, O God." Again, let's identify the parties here. First of all, God refers to a coalition of nations. Now, these nations are ultimately a tool of Satan.
God refers to a coalition of nations. Now, these nations are ultimately a tool of Satan.
He is using them as his last-ditch attack on Jehovah's people.
There is no need to describe it further.
Although Watchtower withdrew its United Nations NGO status in 2001 after the secret was publicly exposed, this did not end their soiree with political organizations directly involved with the United Nations. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, or OSCE, which regards the UN as a vital ally in maintaining peace and security, regularly holds summits entitled The Human Dimension. In 2007, several NGO representatives from the Jehovah's Witnesses communities drew attention to incidents of discriminatory attitude and manifestations of intolerance in a number of participating states. If Watchtower had faith that Jehovah would save them from the world governments, why would they need protection from what they refer to as tools of the devil to survive in a changing political climate that is beginning to oppose witnesses worldwide?